From Saturday Night Live to Hollywood blockbusters, Chevy Chase built a comedy empire that defined an era. But behind the laughter lurked a reputation for being one of the most difficult personalities in the business. His caustic humor and backstage behavior created a trail of burned bridges that spans decades of entertainment history. Here are the top 10 actors who truly hated Chevy Chase the most. Bill Murray. The feud between Bill Murray and Chevy Chase is legendary in Hollywood circles, a clash of titans that began when Murray replaced Chase on Saturday Night Live in 1976. The transition created natural tension, with Murray stepping into the enormous shadow left by SNL's first breakout star. Chase's departure had been abrupt, leaving the cast feeling abandoned while he pursued movie stardom, a cardinal sin in the close-knit comedy community. Their animosity exploded into a physical confrontation minutes before Chase was set to host SNL in 1978. According to multiple cast members who witnessed the incident, Murray approached Chase backstage and immediately started needling him about his failed marriage and declining film prospects. Chase reportedly fired back with jabs about Murray's appearance and uneven performances on the show. Medium talent, Murray reportedly shouted at Chase, a particularly cutting insult in an industry built on ego. The altercation turned physical, with the two having to be separated by fellow cast members, including Gilda Radner and Dan Aykroyd. SNL writer Tom Schiller later described the scene as like watching two lions going after the same piece of meat. The confrontation wasn't just about personal dislike. It represented a deeper ideological divide about comedy itself. Murray embodied the new guard of SNL, the Chicago-trained improvisers who valued ensemble work, while Chase represented the solo star approach that prioritized individual fame over group cohesion. What made this feud so potent was how it represented a philosophical divide in comedy styles. Chase's smug, physically precise humor versus Murray's more anarchic, emotionally raw approach. Though they later worked together on Caddyshack, 1980, the tension remained palpable on set. Director Harold Ramis deliberately scheduled their scenes on different days when possible. "You could cut the tension with a knife," Caddyshack producer John Peters told Rolling Stone. "We essentially shot two different movies on the same set." Years later, Murray acknowledged the feud in an interview with Empire magazine. "It was really a Hollywood fight, a don't touch my face kind of thing." The two have reportedly made peace in recent years, with Murray telling Howard Stern, "I feel bad about it, but we're both much older now." Chase has been less conciliatory, remarking to the Washington Post that Murray got it right in the neck, that's all, suggesting the wounds still linger despite the passage of time. Their clash remains one of comedy's most infamous behind-the-scenes moments, a reminder of the volatile personalities that often fuel the best comedy and the professional jealousies that can turn collaborative art into personal battlegrounds. Dan Aykroyd. Despite appearing to be friends and colleagues in movies like Spies Like Us, Dan Aykroyd's relationship with Chevy Chase was complicated by professional respect mixed with personal exasperation. As fellow SNL alumni, they shared a creative wavelength but diverged dramatically in their approach to collaboration and professional conduct. During the filming of Spies Like Us in 1985, tensions reportedly simmered beneath the surface. According to crew members, Aykroyd, known for his professionalism and preparation, grew frustrated with Chase's improvisational tangents and tendency to change scenes to favor his own character. Dan would arrive knowing every line ready to go, while Chevy often seemed to be winging it, one assistant director told Entertainment Weekly years later. Dan never complained openly, but you could see the frustration in his eyes when takes were blown for the 10th time. The filming coincided with Chase's infamous drug and alcohol problems of the mid-1980s, which allegedly contributed to his erratic behavior. While Aykroyd was known for his tolerance of eccentric personalities, he'd worked successfully with both John Belushi and Bill Murray. Sources close to production claim he reached his limit with Chase during a particularly difficult night shoot in Norway. After Chase repeatedly missed cues and demanded script changes at the last minute, Aykroyd reportedly walked off set for 2 hours, the only such incident in his otherwise sterling professional reputation. The breaking point allegedly came during a press junket when Chase repeatedly interrupted Aykroyd during interviews, steering conversations back to his own career highlights. During one televised junket appearance, Chase visibly cut Aykroyd off mid-sentence 3 times, leading to an awkward silence that spoke volumes. Though more restrained than others on this list, Aykroyd's diplomatic silence spoke volumes. In his 2002 memoir, Aykroyd offered a carefully worded assessment. Chevy had his process, and sometimes that process could be challenging for those around him. What worked so brilliantly on screen often came at a cost behind the cameras. According to SNL writer Tom Davis, the two maintained a professional courtesy that masked deeper issues. Dan is a gentleman who doesn't air dirty laundry, Davis explained, but he made it clear to those of us who knew him well that working with Chevy was something he wouldn't rush to repeat. Indeed, despite their apparent chemistry in Spies Like Us, the two never worked together on another major project, a telling absence given how frequently SNL alumni collaborated throughout the 1980s and 1990s. While never escalating to the level of other Chase feuds, the relationship remained professional rather than friendly. Their comedic chemistry on screen masked a behind-the-scenes dynamic where Aykroyd reportedly kept interactions strictly business, a testament to his professionalism and perhaps the strongest indication of his true feelings about his former colleague. Jane Curtin. As one of SNL's original not-ready-for-primetime players alongside Chase, Jane Curtin experienced firsthand the ego and arrogance that would come to define his reputation. Their tension began during the show's first season when Chase frequently broke character during Curtin's carefully crafted segments, stealing focus and disrupting the flow she worked hard to maintain. Curtin, trained in theater and committed to comedic craft, reportedly confronted Chase about this behavior after a particularly disruptive Weekend Update segment in 1976. According to crew members present, Chase dismissed her concerns with his trademark smirk, suggesting she lighten up and remember that the audience came to see me. This dismissive attitude toward a colleague established a pattern that would follow Chase throughout his career. The situation deteriorated after Chase left SNL for Hollywood. When he returned as a host, Curtin observed a dramatic shift in his demeanor. When he came back to host, he was a prima donna, Curtin revealed in the book Live from New York. He was rude to the cast members, and he was appalling to be around. She described how Chase would criticize writers' work and demand special treatment that created a toxic atmosphere throughout the week of production. During his 1978 hosting stint, Chase allegedly belittled a sketch Curtin had co-written, calling it suburban housewife humor in front of the entire writing staff. Curtin, known for her professionalism, reportedly responded, "At least I can write something other than falling down." The exchange highlighted the fundamental difference between Chase's physical comedy approach and Curtin's more sophisticated character work. What distinguished Curtin's dislike was its origin in direct observation rather than industry gossip. As a consummate professional known for avoiding drama, her rare public comments about Chase carried particular weight. "I didn't like him when he was here, and I didn't like him when he came back," she stated bluntly in a 2011 interview, a remarkable declaration from someone typically guarded about colleague criticisms. In a 2018 roundtable discussion about SNL's early days, Curtin elaborated, "The difference between Chevy and someone like Dan Aykroyd or Gilda Radner was that they understood ensemble work. Chevy never did. He viewed us as his supporting cast, not his equals." This fundamental misunderstanding of collaborative comedy created rifts that never healed. The fallout continued for decades, with Curtin notably absent from reunion events where Chase was featured prominently. When she does attend SNL retrospectives, insiders note they are carefully scheduled to keep the two separated. Her concrete stance against his behavior established her as one of the first to call out the problematic conduct that would later become his calling card, a feminist hero before the term had gained mainstream traction in Hollywood. Gilda Radner. The relationship between Gilda Radner and Chevy Chase represents one of the more poignant entries on this list, a friendship that soured into disappointment and disillusionment. During SNL's first season, Radner and Chase developed a close bond, with their comedic chemistry producing memorable sketches that helped define the show's early identity. On camera, they portrayed a perfect comedy partnership, with Radner's vulnerability playing beautifully against Chase's smug persona. Off-camera, colleagues described their relationship as almost sibling-like, with Radner one of the few who could make Chase genuinely laugh during table reads. They had a special connection, SNL writer Rosie Schuster recalled. Gilda saw something in Chevy that the rest of us missed, a vulnerability beneath the arrogance. The turning point came after Chase's abrupt departure for Hollywood, which Radner reportedly viewed as abandonment of the ensemble that had built SNL's success. According to fellow cast member Lorraine Newman, Radner felt particularly betrayed given their close friendship. Gilda had really invested in that relationship, Newman later recalled. When he left without much warning, she took it personally. She'd cry in her dressing room, wondering if she'd done something wrong. Chase's swift ascent to movie stardom, becoming the highest-paid comedian in Hollywood by 1978, contrasted with the grueling weekly television schedule his former castmates still endured. When Chase returned to host in subsequent seasons, Radner was reportedly devastated by his changed demeanor. During one infamous hosting stint, Chase allegedly refused to perform a sketch Radner had written specifically for them, claiming it wasn't cinematic enough for his new image. In her autobiography, It's Always Something, Radner alluded to this disappointment. Sometimes people you think will always be there for you become strangers when circumstances change. Though not naming Chase directly, those close to the production understood the reference. Alan Zweibel, who wrote many of Radner's best sketches, later confirmed that passage was about Chevy. She felt he'd changed fundamentally after finding fame, and not for the better. The distance between them grew as Chase's reputation for difficult behavior solidified. By the time of SNL's 5th anniversary special in 1980, witnesses described their interaction as cordial but strained, a far cry from their earlier camaraderie. At one point during rehearsals, Radner reportedly attempted to recreate one of their old bits, only to have Chase dismiss it as ancient history. Though Radner maintained her characteristic grace publicly, friends claimed she privately expressed regret over Chase's transformation from colleague to cautionary tale. Before her tragic early death from ovarian cancer in 1989, Radner reportedly told close friend Martin Short, "Fame changes people, but it doesn't have to change them the way it changed Chevy." Their story illustrates how fame can reconfigure even the most promising friendships in Hollywood, and how different artists respond to success in dramatically different ways. Rising tensions and diverging career paths would continue to shape relationships as Chase's star power grew. The cycle of fallouts was just beginning, establishing a pattern that would define his career as much as his comedic talents. John Belushi. The animosity between John Belushi and Chevy Chase was rooted in competing visions of comedy and authenticity. While both were breakout stars from SNL's original cast, Belushi viewed Chase's approach to comedy as calculated and inauthentic compared to his own raw countercultural ethos. Their clash began during SNL's first season, where their contrasting styles created natural friction. Belushi, with his anarchic energy and commitment to physical comedy, reportedly resented how Chase's Weekend Update segment required minimal preparation yet received maximum attention. According to writer Tom Schiller, John would spend hours in makeup becoming characters, while Chevy just had to sit at a desk and smirk. It drove John crazy. Their conflict intensified after Chase left SNL for Hollywood fame. According to Bob Woodward's controversial biography, Wired, Belushi felt Chase had betrayed the anarchic spirit of the show in favor of commercial success. Chevy was the antithesis of John's punk rock comedy philosophy, Second City director Del Close told Woodward. John saw him as a sellout who didn't respect the art. The situation worsened when Chase began to achieve massive success with films like Foul Play and Caddyshack, while Belushi struggled with the commercial failure of 1941. Doug Kenny, who worked with both comedians, reportedly observed, John hated how easily success came to Chevy, while he had to fight for everything. This professional jealousy, combined with their already established personal differences, created a toxic dynamic. The hostility peaked during Chase's returns to host SNL. During one infamous episode, Belushi reportedly sabotaged one of Chase's sketches by deliberately flubbing lines and breaking character, a rare breach of professional standards for the otherwise committed performer. Witnesses describe Belushi mocking Chase's physical comedy behind his back, performing exaggerated impressions of Chase's pratfalls for the rest of the cast. Their feud took a darker turn as Belushi's substance abuse problems worsened. According to several accounts, Chase, despite his own well-documented cocaine use, would lecture Belushi about his excesses, creating explosive confrontations. During the filming of Caddyshack, where both had roles, though no scenes together, Chase allegedly made repeated comments about Belushi's weight and lifestyle that got back to the Animal House star. What made their conflict particularly pointed was Belushi's influence over the rest of the cast. As SNL's resident rebel, his open disdain for Chase created permission for others to express similar sentiments. In later years before his tragic death, Belushi reportedly refused to participate in projects where Chase was involved, including initially declining a role in Caddyshack until assured their scenes would be filmed separately. Their rivalry represented a fundamental split between commercial comedy and counterculture that defined that era of American humor. After Belushi's death in 1982, Chase claimed they had reconciled, but those closest to Belushi disputed this account. As Dan Aykroyd reportedly remarked, they were oil and water to the very end. Damon Wayans. Damon Wayans' collision with Chevy Chase stemmed from a brief but explosive interaction during Wayans' short tenure on Saturday Night Live in 1985. As a young comedian trying to establish himself, Wayans encountered Chase when the latter returned as a host, a meeting that would have lasting consequences for both careers. The mid-1980s marked a transitional period for SNL, with producer Dick Ebersol attempting to rebuild the show after its near cancellation. Wayans, hired as a featured player, found himself frequently sidelined in minor roles that offered little opportunity to showcase his unique comedic voice. Meanwhile, Chase, returning as host after achieving movie stardom, wielded considerable influence over the show's content. According to multiple sources, tension arose when Wayans, frustrated by being sidelined in sketches, decided to improvise during a scene where he was cast as an extra. Playing a police officer with a single line, Wayans suddenly switched into an effeminate characterization that wasn't in the script, a bold move for a newcomer. Chase, known for his rigidity about script adherence, at least when it came to others, was reportedly furious about Wayans going off book. Backstage witnesses described a heated exchange where Chase allegedly made racially insensitive remarks that left Wayans fuming. Former cast member Jim Belushi recalled the incident in a 2018 interview. Damon was trying to make his mark, and Chevy just shut him down completely. The things he said would never fly today. They shouldn't have flown then either. The exact words remain contested, but multiple sources confirm racial undertones in the criticism. The situation deteriorated further when producer Lorne Michaels fired Wayans for the improvisation. In subsequent interviews, Wayans has suggested that Chase's influence played a role in this decision. "I got fired because I didn't play by the rules," Wayans told The Breakfast Club in 2015. "There was a certain star who didn't appreciate what I brought to the table," while Michaels has maintained the firing was his decision alone. Insiders note that Chase's complaints about Wayans' unprofessionalism carried significant weight. The incident proved transformative for Wayans, who channeled his frustration into creating In Living Color with his brother Keenan, a groundbreaking sketch show that centered black comedic voices and directly challenged SNL's approach to diversity. The show's success represented a powerful rebuke to both Chase and the SNL establishment that had marginalized his talents. The fallout from this incident became part of SNL lore, with Wayans using it as fuel for his later success with In Living Color, a show that directly challenged SNL's approach to diversity. Years later, when asked about Chase, Wayans has been carefully measured but pointed. "Some experiences teach you exactly what kind of performer you don't want to become." The brief interaction left a lasting impression that informed Wayans' own leadership style when he gained the power to shape comedy on his own terms. In a 2019 documentary about black comedians, Wayans reflected, "Sometimes the worst experiences create the best opportunities. If I hadn't been fired, maybe we never would have created In Living Color. So in a twisted way, I should thank Chevy Chase." The backhanded acknowledgement perfectly encapsulates how Chase's negative influence ironically sparked creative revolutions that would ultimately overshadow his own contributions to comedy. Richard Dreyfuss. The clash between Richard Dreyfuss and Chevy Chase during the making of 1991's Nothing But Trouble represents one of Hollywood's more explosive on-set conflicts. Oscar winner Dreyfuss found himself opposite Chase in this ill-fated comedy, creating a perfect storm of strong personalities trapped in a troubled production. The film, directed by Dan Aykroyd, was already facing numerous challenges: an unwieldy script, a ballooning budget, and studio concerns about the bizarre concept. Dropping two established stars with drastically different approaches to acting into this pressure cooker environment proved disastrous. Dreyfuss, fresh from critically acclaimed dramatic roles in films like Tin Men and Always, approached the material with his trademark intensity, while Chase relied on his established comedy persona. Tension erupted almost immediately, according to crew members. Dreyfuss, known for his intense preparation and dramatic approach, reportedly found Chase's improvisational style disruptive and unprofessional. Richard would come in having studied the script meticulously, and Chevy would essentially throw it all out the window, one assistant director told The Hollywood Reporter years later. You could see Richard's blood pressure rising with every take. A particular point of contention was Chase's tendency to break character and laugh during Dreyfuss's more serious moments, a behavior Dreyfuss interpreted as deliberate sabotage. Makeup artist Monty Westmore later recalled having to repeatedly touch up Dreyfuss's makeup because he was turning red with anger after takes with Chase. The breaking point came during a particularly difficult scene when Chase allegedly kept deliberately sabotaging takes with improvisations that undermined Dreyfuss's performance. According to multiple on-set sources, Dreyfuss finally exploded. "Are you trying to sabotage this film, or are you just an asshole by nature?" The set reportedly fell silent as the two actors were separated by crew members. Director Aykroyd, caught between his SNL colleague and his Oscar-winning star, struggled to maintain peace. Production assistant Linda Fields described the atmosphere. Dan would try to mediate, but Chevy and Richard had such fundamentally different views on how to approach the material that reconciliation was impossible. We basically shot their scenes separately whenever possible. In subsequent years, Dreyfuss hasn't minced words about the experience. In a 2009 interview, he called it the most painful experience of my life and referred to Chase as the most dishonest person I've ever met in my life. When asked to elaborate, Dreyfuss explained, "There's a difference between actors who are difficult because they're striving for excellence and those who are difficult because they're insecure bullies. Guess which category Chevy falls into?" The film bombed critically and commercially, but the feud lived on, with neither actor ever working together again. When asked about Chase in a 2017 retrospective about his career, Dreyfuss simply said, "I've worked with some extraordinary talents in my career. He wasn't one of them." Their clash exemplifies how creative differences, when combined with strong personalities, can create enduring Hollywood enemies and derail promising projects. Hollywood feuds often follow patterns: ego clashes, creative differences, and power struggles. But some conflicts cut deeper, affecting entire productions and reshaping careers. As we move into more recent years, Chase's pattern of alienation continued into a new generation of performers. Joel McHale. The tension between Joel McHale and Chevy Chase during their time on NBC's Community represents one of Chase's more recent and well-documented conflicts. As fellow cast members on the cult comedy series, their relationship deteriorated over the show's first 4 seasons in ways that eventually became public knowledge and affected the entire production. McHale, as the show's lead and an executive producer in later seasons, found himself in the uncomfortable position of mediating between an increasingly difficult Chase and the creative team led by creator Dan Harmon. The conflict emerged against the backdrop of a show that was critically acclaimed but constantly on the bubble of cancellation, adding pressure to an already stressful production environment. The problems began subtly, with McHale, as the show's lead and an executive producer, increasingly forced to mediate between Chase and the creative team. According to cast members, Chase frequently complained about the writing, the shooting schedule, and his character Pierce Hawthorne's more offensive moments. McHale, committed to the show's vision, often found himself defending creator Dan Harmon's choices against Chase's objections. Cast member Yvette Nicole Brown later revealed in an interview with the New York Times, Joel took the brunt of it because he was number one on the call sheet. He had to be the adult in the room when Chevy would have his moments. These moments reportedly included refusing to shoot scenes, demanding rewrites minutes before filming, and walking off set when displeased, behavior that directly impacted McHale's own performance schedule. As the show progressed, Chase became increasingly vocal about his dissatisfaction, famously declaring that sitcoms were the lowest form of television. McHale, who had built his career as host of The Soup before landing Community, took these comments as personal attacks on his career choices. During a particularly tense third-season episode shoot, Chase reportedly told McHale, "I was making movies when you were still hosting that garbage clip show." According to witnesses, McHale responded with characteristic deadpan humor. Yes, but were they good movies? The situation reached a breaking point during season 4, when Chase reportedly used racial slurs while expressing frustration about his character's dialogue. McHale, along with the cast, confronted Chase about his behavior. In his 2016 memoir, Thanks for the Money, McHale carefully addressed the situation. Working with Chevy was a valuable lesson in patience and professionalism. There were days that tested everyone's resolve. Behind the scenes, McHale reportedly became instrumental in enforcing boundaries, including implementing a three-strike system for Chase's behavior during season 4. Production assistant Alex Spencer told the AV Club, Joel would literally stand in the doorway sometimes and say, "You can't leave yet, we haven't finished the scene." He became the Chase Wrangler by default. What distinguished this feud was McHale's approach, maintaining professionalism while still establishing boundaries. When Chase left the show after season 4, McHale publicly took the high road but privately expressed relief to colleagues. In subsequent interviews, McHale has employed diplomatic language that industry insiders recognize as barely concealed disdain. Chevy brought unique challenges to the set that helped us all grow as performers. The Community experience cemented Chase's reputation as difficult, while elevating McHale's standing as someone who could handle challenging personalities while protecting the show's best interests. Donald Glover. Donald Glover's conflict with Chevy Chase during their time on Community stands out for its generational and racial dimensions. As the youngest main cast member, Glover represented a new approach to comedy. That contrasted sharply with Chase's established style, a difference Chase reportedly struggled to accept from the beginning of their working relationship. When Community began filming in 2009, Glover was still an up-and-coming talent whose previous credits included writing for 30 Rock and performing with the sketch group Derek Comedy. Chase, despite his declining star power, still carried the weight of his legendary status from the 1970s and 1980s. This created an immediate power imbalance that manifested in uncomfortable ways on set. According to multiple cast and crew accounts, Chase made racially insensitive comments toward Glover throughout their time working together. In a 2018 New Yorker profile, Glover recalled, "Chevy was the first to realize that I was funny. I registered inside of him, and he immediately felt threatened." This acknowledgement of Glover's talent, paired with apparent resentment, created a uniquely uncomfortable dynamic. During the filming of the second season, Chase allegedly interrupted Glover's scenes multiple times with unnecessary advice about physical comedy, a specialty Chase considered his domain. Script coordinator Sarah Bidens told Vulture, "It was uncomfortable to watch because Donald clearly had his own approach that was working brilliantly, but Chevy seemed determined to make him do things the Chevy way." The situation intensified as Glover's star rose rapidly with his music career as Childish Gambino and expanding acting opportunities. Chase allegedly told Glover, "People think you're funnier because you're black," a comment that deeply offended Glover, but which he used as creative fuel. "I just saw Chevy as someone who was scared," Glover later told The New Yorker, displaying remarkable emotional intelligence about the situation. "I can't help him, though. He's on his own journey." Cast member Danny Pudi described witnessing one particularly tense exchange. Donald handled it with such grace, he just nodded and then proceeded to improvise a scene that had the entire crew laughing. It was like watching the torch being passed whether Chevy wanted to pass it or not. The fallout extended beyond their personal relationship to affect the show's creative direction. Series creator Dan Harmon has publicly stated that Chase's treatment of Glover influenced his decision to give Glover's character Troy Barnes more prominence, effectively using Chase's negativity to elevate Glover's position. I started writing more for Donald partially because he was so damn good, but also admittedly because it clearly irritated Chevy, Harmon confessed on his podcast Harmontown. When Glover left the show in Season 5 to pursue other opportunities, industry insiders noted that escaping the toxic dynamic with Chase was likely a contributing factor. In a rare, unguarded moment during a 2016 interview, Glover admitted, "Some work environments you're just counting the days until you can leave, you know." When asked if he was referring to Community, he simply smiled and changed the subject. Their conflict illustrates how outdated attitudes collided with modern sensibilities in an evolving comedy landscape. The aftermath speaks volumes. Chase's career continued to decline after Community, while Glover has emerged as one of the most celebrated multi-hyphenate talents of his generation, with Atlanta major film roles and Grammy-winning music, a successful trajectory that stands as perhaps the most eloquent response to Chase's dismissive treatment. Dan Harmon. The antagonism between Community creator Dan Harmon and Chevy Chase represents perhaps the most public and bitter feud on this list, one that played out not just behind the scenes but in leaked voicemails, public statements, and social media posts. As the showrunner who cast Chase as Pierce Hawthorne, Harmon's relationship with the comedy veteran deteriorated into open warfare that ultimately altered the course of the beloved cult show. The seeds of conflict were planted from the pilot episode. According to writers' room accounts, Chase frequently questioned Harmon's vision for his character, suggesting that Pierce should be more sympathetic and less of a bigoted foil. Harmon, known for drawing character elements from his own life, had specifically written Pierce as an emotionally stunted figure representing his own worst fears about aging. This fundamental disagreement about the character created an immediate creative tension. Tensions began during the show's first season when Chase frequently expressed dissatisfaction with his character and the shooting schedule. According to production staff, Chase would often leave set early or refuse to film certain scenes he disagreed with. Harmon, known for his perfectionist approach, found Chase's behavior increasingly disruptive to his creative vision. Writer Megan Gans recalled, Dan would be rewriting until 4 a.m. to make the scripts better, and then Chevy would refuse to say the lines. It was heartbreaking to watch. By Season 2, their working relationship had deteriorated to the point where they communicated primarily through intermediaries. Chase would send notes about scripts to producers rather than speaking directly to Harmon. In response, Harmon increasingly wrote Chase's character as the butt of jokes, a passive-aggressive cycle that production designer Denise Pizzini described as two creative people finding increasingly creative ways to express their dislike for each other. The situation exploded at the wrap party for Season 3 when Harmon played a profanity-laden voicemail from Chase to the assembled cast and crew, a public humiliation that Chase never forgave. In the voicemail, which later leaked online, Chase could be heard calling the show mediocre sitcom bullshit and personally attacking Harmon's writing abilities. Harmon's decision to play this private message publicly crossed a line that many in the industry, even those sympathetic to his position, found unprofessional. Chase retaliated with his own verbal attacks, reportedly using racial slurs during an on-set meltdown about his character's dialogue. The feud became so toxic that Sony Pictures Television was forced to intervene. Executive producer Chris McKenna told The Hollywood Reporter it went beyond a personality clash to something that was affecting the entire production. No one was happy coming to work. In subsequent years, Harmon has been remarkably candid about the conflict. On his podcast Harmontown, he acknowledged his own role. I was vindictive, and I was unprofessional, but he was genuinely disruptive and genuinely toxic. Harmon has described writing episodes while imagining ways to make Chase miserable, a creative approach he later acknowledged was self-destructive and unfair to the other actors and crew. The aftermath saw Harmon briefly fired after Season 3, though later rehired, while Chase left the show permanently during Season 4. When Harmon returned for Season 5, he wrote a metatextual farewell to Chase's character that many critics interpreted as a final parting shot in their feud. The episode featured Pierce dying off screen, with his final act being to label the study group members with painfully accurate assessments of their flaws, a narrative choice that paralleled Chase's real-life ability to identify others' insecurities. Their feud represents the perfect storm of creative differences, generational gaps, and volatile personalities. Even years later, Harmon has referred to working with Chase as psychological hell, while Chase has called Community a big mistake in his career. Their conflict ultimately affected the show's trajectory, the cast's experience, and their respective reputations in the industry, a cautionary tale about what happens when creative collaboration collapses into personal animosity. From SNL in the 1970s to Community in the 2010s, Chevy Chase's career has been defined as much by his comedic talent as by his interpersonal conflicts. The pattern that emerges from these feuds reveals a complex figure whose difficulties collaborating have become as legendary as his performances. What causes someone so gifted to generate such consistent animosity from colleagues? Industry psychologists have suggested that Chase's behavior exhibits classic signs of insecurity masked by arrogance, a combination that creates particularly difficult workplace dynamics. His transition from television to film and back to television tracked with changing power dynamics that may have exacerbated these tendencies. Former co-star Jane Curtin once observed, "Chevy seems happiest when he's the undisputed star. The minute he has to share the spotlight, problems begin." The generational aspect of Chase's conflicts is particularly telling. His earliest feuds with SNL colleagues occurred during comedy's transition from the stand-up influenced 1970s to the more collaborative, ensemble-oriented 1980s. By the time he joined Community in 2009, the comedy landscape had transformed entirely, embracing diversity and nuance in ways that contrasted sharply with Chase's broad physical comedy background. Each new generation of performers seemed to trigger his defensive responses more intensely. Chase's self-awareness about these patterns remains questionable. In rare reflective moments, he has acknowledged being difficult, but typically attributes the friction to his high standards rather than his behavior. In a 2018 interview, he claimed, "I'm difficult because I care about the product. I'm difficult because I know what works." This perspective stands in stark contrast to the consistent accounts from those who worked with him, who describe behavior that undermined rather than elevated productions. The cost of these conflicts extends beyond personal relationships to Chase's creative legacy. While contemporaries like Bill Murray successfully evolved their comedy styles and found new audiences across decades, Chase has struggled to maintain relevance. His unwillingness or inability to adapt to changing comedic sensibilities, as evidenced by his conflicts with younger performers like Donald Glover, has limited his career options and diminished his influence on contemporary comedy. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of Chase's feuds is how they contrast with his on-screen persona. The smug, self-assured characters he portrayed so effectively seem to reflect elements of his real personality, but without the warmth or redemptive qualities that made those characters ultimately likable. The gap between the Chevy Chase audiences loved on screen and the man his colleagues encountered behind the cameras represents one of Hollywood's more fascinating disconnects. As Chase enters his later years, the question remains whether these patterns will define his ultimate legacy. Will he be remembered primarily for creating iconic characters in films like Caddyshack, Fletch, and the Vacation series, or will his reputation as the most difficult actor in Hollywood overshadow those achievements? The answer likely depends on whether Chase can eventually acknowledge and reconcile with the trail of broken relationships that parallels his impressive comedic contributions. Did we miss any major Chevy Chase conflicts? Are there other notorious Hollywood feuds you'd like us to explore next? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into entertainment's most fascinating personalities. See you in the next one.